One. All right. What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Of Like Minds video podcast. Got a super special guest today, Mr. Julian Sena, Mr. Juju himself. Juju, thank you so much for coming on today.
Hello, what's up? Hi, Kevin. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. And just want to give a little intro into Juju is actually maybe unbeknownst to most of you, but one of my longest and friends actually. We've known each other since elementary school. We both at the time were living in Mira Mesa, and
Yep.
first time I saw this guy was he was dancing on stage. And so we're going to be getting into a lot of Juju's narrative of dancing, and what that was like, and just a little like teaser into that, just you being the cool guy
Oh
and being
gosh.
dancing to Backstreet Boys, and you had a
Yeah.
whole gang of guys, like it was maybe like four or
Yeah.
five of you.
Yeah.
And I started doing the solo acts. So one, Juju, if you can just like talk about what it was like growing up where you grew up, and then we'll kind of get into the dance stuff later, but just talking about like what it was like growing up in childhood.
Oh man. I lived my childhood out in Mira Mesa, Mason Elementary. Yeah. Woo woo.
Lions.
Yeah, for reals. Um, Went there from kindergarten to fifth grade. First grade, I had like my first taste of like performing at a talent show. Um, I loved dancing at the time, and there was a talent show that came up, and I really wanted to do it, so I stayed after school and tried out. Um, and the crazy thing is, I did nothing. Me and like it was me and three other friends, and we literally just stood on stage and did nothing, like except for like singing. And then the guys were behind me, and they were just doing whatever I was doing, and I was kind of like trying to do stuff, but I didn't really know how. So after after that audition, the Miss Brigham, the person who was in charge of like
Mhm.
coordinating for talent show and stuff, she was like, "We really want you to be in, but you guys have to like learn something." So she got like this group of fifth graders who were dancing to NSYNC's "I Want You Back," and they choreographed like a routine for us to do while we were performing and while we were singing. So that's how everything started. That was my first grade first year doing the town show in first grade, and then every year after that, uh, I did the same, or we did similar things. Like we would sing and dance, and then towards fourth and fifth grade, I would just dance. So
Absolutely. I mean, what
yeah,
was even? I mean, first grade. You're still in the single digits in terms of age. So what was your intro to dance? Like, were you watching or like, at the time when we would still watch music videos? Like, who
yeah.
was maybe your first or initial influence in that realm?
Dang, yeah. My first memory with dance would be my tita picked me up from kindergarten, and she had the new Backstreet Boys CD, so she played it in our living room. And I remember hearing the first song from song 1 to song 12. I was just dancing, so I was dancing for like a good hour and a half. If 5-year-old me, like in the living room, and I had no technique or anything like that, so I was just like hopping around doing whatever.
Hmm.
And yeah, after that, she kind of introduced me to like everything else going on in music. So In Sync, I mean Usher, Michael Jackson, all those videos. And this was like pre YouTube, so she would record the music videos on VHS, and then me and a couple of other cousins or family friends, we would learn the routines through like, yeah, through our cassette player, pretty much.
Oh my God. And
Yeah,
people don't even understand and know that at that time. I remember just being in such awe because
yeah,
what you're telling us and giving us that insight, like oh, like we didn't really know what we were doing, but from my vantage point and watching y'all, I was just like, whoa, like this group, this guy, and because I remember you'd always stand in the middle, and I'd always
yeah,
watch you, and I'm just like,
yeah.
man, like these guys are so cool, and I remember just being like, whoa, like this is serious, like this is wild, like this is really something, and I mean, everyone would go crazy,
Yeah.
go nuts for y'all.
Dude, we're like our own boy band for sure. Like four like super small like kindergartners, first graders, like just singing.
Yeah, no,
That's cool.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And at the time, so we went to the same elementary school, and talking about moving. I think at that time you moved. Did you move already south side by that point, going to Eastlake, or what was that transition like?
Yeah, yeah. Towards the end of my fifth grade year, I moved to Eastlake.
Hmm.
And that was a whole new thing for me because Eastlake's totally different from Mira Mesa. It's
Hmm.
like culturally too. I was away from all my cousins, and the new elementary school that I went to didn't really have any like people who were into dancing. They're kind of just into like other things like sports. So
Mm. Did you
yeah.
did you continue dance because of that dynamic, or did you do other things, or what
Whew.
was that like?
Yeah. I actually continued, but I mean, it wasn't dance wasn't like the center of my life back then either. Like it was kind of just something I did for fun.
Hmm.
So, um, but I would occasionally spend my recesses like alone behind the wall ball wall, like dancing. Yeah. I'd be working on my glides and stuff, just like trying things out. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
great.
And then were you I think high school for you went to Eastlake, right?
Yeah.
So they have a I forgot the team, but weren't you're directing and kind of getting your first little experience of leadership
Yeah.
and taking dance a little bit more seriously. So what was that like kind of doing that in high school?
Oh man, it was great. It kind of just like it happened without me really noticing it because at first, like when I was a freshman, I didn't really think much of joining clubs, right? Like that's the thing you're supposed to do in high school. You're supposed to join like tons of clubs, and Eastlake was it's so unique in terms of what they offer in terms of dance because Eastlake had a b-boy club, they had like air bands. They're pretty
Hmm.
prominent in that scene as well, and they had their own like dance company, dance team. So I mean, you got a lot of things to offer as a freshman in Eastlake, and I kind of just took advantage of all that. Mm, Eventually, as I got older, more responsibilities kind of came on to me as a upperclassman. So I would take, freshmen under my wing. I would, you know, teach them choreography. I would, just do things to like run rehearsal. And eventually it kind of evolved into like a director slash captain role. And that was really fun. Learned a lot. I was definitely way more angry back then for sure. So
Way more angry? What do you mean by that?
no, because like how all males like you kind of have to be like there's this back then um way with the dance community it was actually pretty commonplace to be like super old school when it came to running a team. What I mean by that is like um very drill based, like very militant, like um you had to be pretty disciplined, and it was okay for directors to be mean because it was like a motivator at the time. And it's not like today where where we're so based on like positivity and self-growth and like making sure everyone handles their job and takes care of their mental health. um yeah, it was just a different scene being a leader back then, so it was interesting.
No, absolutely. And I think that's a dynamic that's going to be interesting to hear what you have to say, but just talking about, you are dancing amongst your peers and then getting this kind of leadership role like presented to you and you taking it.
Yeah.
What was that transition like? Now you're pretty much, same age as everyone, but now you're in charge and you're leading things. What was that transition like for you?
That transition was interesting because I didn't. Like honestly, I'm a short guy. Like and my senior year in high school, I was like still pretty short. Like I got my growth spurt like after senior year.
Hmm.
Um, so not everyone liked taking orders from like a 5'3" skinny boy. He's a good dancer and stuff, but he would yell at you and make you drop and do push-ups and stuff. So it definitely takes some adjusting, and a lot of these guys are like my homies and stuff. So sometimes they wouldn't take training seriously, and it would kind of I would have to like sit them down and just be like, yo, like that shit doesn't fly, you
Hmm.
know.
And if I can recall, like this is probably what year is this right now?
Ooh, 2010,
Yeah.
2009, 2010. Yeah.
So I think something that you and I have always kind of shared the same sentiments about are, at the time, 2008. I think that's when ABDC first launched and when Jabba kind of blew up and they won,
Right.
and a lot more people started getting into it because they saw like, oh, like they're you can do something with this. And I
Yeah.
think someone like you who also comes from like an older guard and kind of the era before that,
Right.
what was it maybe like, dealing with people that are maybe like, oh, like we always talk about this new generation, right? Where it's like, oh,
Yeah.
things come a little bit easier. We expect things to come quicker. And you're
Right.
very about repetition. And I know, having taken your class many times and knowing you, you're very
Yeah.
much a student. So what is that conflict like in terms of, you're coming from this way, like this is how I've learned how to do it, and
Right.
maybe people seeing it's like it's easier than what I'm making it seem like. So just talking about like how you dealt with that.
Yeah. Yeah. To be honest, I did kind of think it was like, oh, there are a ton of people like dancing now. This is interesting. You know what I mean? But at the same time, I didn't really look down on it because I mean, everyone has to start somewhere, and sometimes people have different reasons for starting to dance. For me, it was because I just loved it. You know what I mean? But I'm pretty sure the way I saw NSYNC and Backstreet Boys and Michael Jackson and Usher, like the people that started to dance at that time, saw Jabberwockies in that same light, or the crews from ABDC. Like they were just so good that they were inspired to like dance. I also have like friends who started dancing because they wanted to get to girls or whatever. You know what I mean? Like you have those homies. You have those homies. So um, yeah, I mean I did think it was like, oh, okay, like dance is popping off right now, but
Hmm.
I was also like, okay, well, it doesn't change anything for me.
That's
Yeah,
big.
yeah,
That's big, and always staying grounded in what and why you decided to continue with that. And this being that year 2010, and I think just talking a little bit about that transition post high school,
yeah,
in terms of what you decided to do post high school, and also like how dance still played a role in your life, even in undergrad.
yeah, yeah. Man, post high school was probably one of the craziest. I don't even know. My post grad life is, or my undergrad life is actually like a little wild. But I'll start it off with went to college, SCSU 2011, 2010, 2011. Um, I also was in a relationship, and the way I kind of handled the relationship, or the way me and my girlfriend at the time handled the relationship, wasn't that healthy in terms of like mental health and
Mm,
all that good stuff. Um, and then I had a job at Regal. I was working concessions at a movie theater, so that was fun.
mhm,
It was a summer job that eventually turned into like a regular part time job.
mhm,
And then what else? I was teaching and I was directing, so I had like hella things on my plate. And I was also on 220, so that's like
mhm.
six things already. Um, yeah, and I quickly learned my freshman year in college that you can't have too much on your plate. I ended up failing out of college my freshman year, and that sent me on a wild ride because when shit hits the fan, like you kind of start like reevaluating things. So um, eventually I lost my job. I went back to school, I started going to community college, but
Mm,
under like a lighter load so I can
mhm.
like get my shit together. Is it okay if I cuss?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. For all the other people listening, apologies for my French. But yeah, I wanted to get my shit together. So came back to school. I eventually broke up with my girlfriend at the time because sometimes you just got to realize when you're not good for
Mm,
another person.
mm.
And yeah, I just focused all my energy to dance and school pretty much. It took me a while to get into the groove of things for sure. I think it took me one more year to really double down on what I was doing. But I definitely think that I wouldn't be here today if I didn't go through what I went through my freshman and sophomore year in college.
Mm.
Yeah,
That's
and that
huge.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It was a low point in my life for sure. Like it was crazy, man. Like when you're failing at every aspect in your life, you kind of it definitely brings you down, and it took me a while to bring that self-esteem back up. It definitely took a lot of work, but it was good because it taught me a lot of things.
Absolutely. Well, one, just thank you for being so transparent and sharing that, Juju. But
Yeah,
two, if you can just, I know, especially now, given our current climate, that's kind of an ongoing battle that a lot of us are going through even now. And so
yeah,
if you can just kind of, maybe if you can go back to that time and take us back to, I mean, if you can break it down as simple as possible, but how did you even do that? You being so widespread in so many spaces and so many integral parts in your life. I mean, this is work, this is school, this is relationships. These are like the
Yeah.
biggest parts of our life. So how did you
Yeah.
do that like step by step? How did you get through that?
Ooh, lots of prioritizing, lots of like subtraction. I think as much as we don't really have a lot of time in when it comes to like our life, you know what I mean? Like we have 24 hours in a day. 8 of those hours like goes to sleep. If you're getting 8 hours of sleep, some people, live off of six, some people live off of three, which I think is crazy. But um and that leaves 16 hours, but you also need to take into account like, okay, when you got to eat, when you got to like prioritize like your relationships, you know what I mean? Like what you got to do for a living. So in reality, you have, certain things, certain times, points in the day are not going to be like negotiable. Like they're non-negotiable aspects of your life. Like how are you going to take care of yourself? Everyone needs sleep, those certain rules. So being able to discern what was important and what was not important was really key there. And that's why I left my job. That's why I left like that relationship that was going on, because it wasn't healthy for me, and it was uh just frankly like not a good use of my time.
Absolutely. And at
Yeah.
this point, you talked about subtracting those things and you said prioritizing. So
Yeah.
you've obviously subtracted, the relationship that, just wasn't working out for the best for either of you.
Hmm.
And you talking about, going, transferring and going to a CC and maybe kind of taking us, after those first 2 years, that freshman and sophomore year, now you're in that like essentially your third year out of high school. And
Yeah.
what's left on your plate now, or like your main focuses, and maybe what was your role in each of those spaces?
Yeah. So my third year after out of high school, it was pretty much where I hit a sweet spot. I think I was ready to take a step into like full-time credits at school, ready to like take those steps to transferring to a 4-year university. Um, I was dancing. I was still directing and I was still teaching, and I was getting paid for it. So those are my ways to get full time. I was finally getting paid for it, because the
Mm.
years before that I was doing that for free, pretty much. And then, uh, yeah, I was just devoting my life to school and dance, pretty much. I was teaching, directing a junior team, and I was fully involved with 220. I think my third year was the year where I started choreographing for the team,
Mm.
like choreographing like sections. So
Mm.
um, it felt really good to kind of get into a groove of things, and it just felt nice. When you have a lot of time and everything feels balanced, you get into that nice state of flow, and yeah, it takes you places.
Absolutely. And I think at this point too, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this third year post grad and because I know you eventually ended up going to school up north in Northridge, right?
Right. Yep.
And talking about the commuting life, because you were very much still not only in school at this
Yeah.
point, but you were also, 220, and it's intense, and it
Yeah.
requires so much work and so much diligence, and you having to be here. It's not something like now you could just zoom. And so
Yeah.
just talking about one, that commuter life, being 100% committed to, all the spaces that you've said, I'm going to be here 100%, and
Yeah.
talk about that dynamic.
Man, that was crazy. Yeah, for so 2 years after I get serious with school, I finally go to Northridge, and everything leading up to me moving to Northridge, I thought that I was done with 220. Like I thought I was like, okay, like this is it. Like this is my last hurrah. Like see you guys, like, and then like I think it was either a week or 2 weeks before 220 auditions for the next season. I'm like looking at my class schedule, and I see that Mondays and Wednesdays are free, and that kind of just like, oh, I can attend 220 rehearsal. Yeah, yeah. And then I was like, well, if I do this, would it be worth it? And at the time, I thought it was, because it was to me at the time, because 220, I'm loyal. I'm loyal to 220. Like they
Mhm.
are, that team like taught me a lot, especially when it came to like mindset and growth. and like doing something out of love. And I love what they stood for, and I still wanted to be a part of that team to kind of contribute to that culture. So I eventually just said F it, and Mondays and Wednesdays, every Monday and Wednesday, I would drive down from Northridge down the 405 to Culture Shock, and that would be 3 hours. 3 hours. Sometimes I'd sleep over at my current girlfriend's house, Casey.
Mhm.
Yeah, shout out to Casey. You're a real
Hey,
one.
shout out to
Yeah,
Casey.
yeah. But yeah, pretty much that would be it. Like I would go down, go to rehearsal, and depending on how tired I was, I would either drive up the 3 hours back to my apartment in LA or stay the night in San Diego and then drive back in the morning. So wild.
I mean, that's something I can empathize with you because I had done that my first year before I
Yeah.
fully moved back, and I was doing that for grown-ups. But so just knowing like what you went through, and
Yeah.
I don't know if maybe you feel the same way, but in terms of, at the time you were still directing, and so
Yeah.
how did that maybe alter the focus? I mean, it's
Mm,
different when rehearsal is convenient and it's 10 minutes away, and when we're younger and we get our parents or our guardians are driving us to dance classes, it's, you don't think about it.
yeah.
But now you're literally having to time manage, and you're making your trek down, like a trek that at the time I don't think anyone else was making on the team, right? It was just you that was commuting. Like everyone was local at the time, I think so.
Right. We also had one more member. His name is Riley. And he was in Corona, which is Inland
Okay.
Empire.
Hmm.
So um like a year after I started commuting, he joined the team and we would carpool. I would take the 215 or the 101 to the 215 into
Uh-huh.
Pasadena, into Corona, and then we'd take the 15 down to SD. So it was wild.
So you'd be
Yeah.
leaving like 3 hours before rehearsals,
Oh yeah, I
right?
would be leaving like 4 hours of rehearsal to be honest.
So just
Um,
all that extra time commitment, Juju. I mean, like,
yeah.
just how, did that change the mentality in terms of going into rehearsal and maybe being more focused, or being like, we need to get this done because I'm here and I'm ready to show up? What was that like?
Yeah, yeah, it definitely taught me to be more disciplined with my time because I had literally like I had to be really picky with what I chose. And I had to be efficient. You know what I mean? Like during rehearsal, we had to set out to finish whatever we set out to do. Whether it be like finish blocking a piece or maybe teaching a section of the choreography. So we really had to be efficient. We really had to kind of stay on top of it. I definitely had to stay on top of it with school on the other side of things because um, those extra 6 hours that I was taking to drive from SC to LA could have been used as study time, you
Hmm.
know? So yeah, on the days where I was home in LA, I would definitely have to, focus on the study.
Mm.
Yeah.
Now, how long, if you could remind us, how long were you directing 224?
Ooh, so I was directing from 2013
Hmm.
to 2016. I stepped down as a director for 2 years, and then I came back as a director for the 2018 season.
Okay, so about 4 years, give or take,
Yeah, yeah,
everything
yeah.
included. So just if you can take us one two-part question, I wanted to ask, was your directing style kind of similar to that, very militant, very a little more strict in terms of when you were in high school? And then two, if you can take us to how you evolved and adapted as a director over the course of those 4 years, and especially that in that between those gap years. And I'm talking
Yeah,
about like that last year. I mean, you have time away. I'm sure that maybe altered it. So just talking about how you
yeah,
evolved as a director and what your style was like.
yeah. My style was directing 220 was definitely different than directing junior teams or my all male. And it was the moment that changed was because uh, I had I had oh, okay. We're getting somewhere. The moment that changed, and this is the reason why. It was because one of my like close friends, who I think of as a brother, was messing around one practice during all male, right during our during in high school, pretty much, and I yelled at him and I gave him like, the discipline. I told him some pretty mean things as a director for sure. And it made him cry. And I remember that moment and feeling like, wow, this is not a good style. This isn't the style for me, or this isn't the style of leadership for me. Um, so that week I kind of took a step back and I kind of thought about like what I wanted to be as a leader and who exemplifies that. And I kind of thought of Phil Jackson, um, just because of the way he approaches like Zen, or his approach to Zen and coaching. And I thought about that, and I also thought about Greg Popovich, who is the Spurs coach, and he talks about culture. And from that moment on, I kind of focused on those two things, like staying calm, staying composed, staying poised, and also making sure that we're generating a culture that's cohesive for the team and amplifies like what the team's talents are and all that stuff. So my approach with 220 was way different. Yeah, definitely a lot more positive for sure. And I think, having a positive mindset or, being charismatic is a plus, because if you can have some sort of infectious energy and you can have that transfer over to your team and, whoever's working with you or under you, like it will speak wonders in what you can do during that rehearsal. Because instead of like, oh, we got to do this, it's like, yeah, let's do this. It's possible,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you and I've talked about this with several people actually, and just you are the epitome of someone who's just positive. And
Oh
I'm
man.
just like, I don't know. And this is, for as long as I've known you, it's always just been like, I'm like, man. We always have those moments where things may not, it gets tough, but overall as
Yeah.
a person, it's just like, you definitely exemplify that. And it's just really cool to see like what you're able to kind of get that from, was kind of that low moment of being like, whoa, like, I wasn't a real asshole to this person. And
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
homie, you said, and I'm
Yeah.
hoping that
Yeah.
relationship is good now. I
Oh
don't know what
yeah.
it's.
He's going to be a part of my bridal court for sure.
Yeah. I
You know
mean,
what I
did
mean?
in high school, like, did just kind of getting to that, did that have like repercussions in terms of like how the rest of the team responded? Because especially at that point, I
Mhm.
mean, we're all still figuring it out. 17, 18 years old, super
Yeah.
young. What did that have any just like, what was that like for the rest of the team, at least at that time?
Yeah. Yeah. To the older people on the team, it was just like, what the fuck is this guy doing? And then to the younger people on the team, they're just like, man, Juju is really, really scary. I
Hmm.
hope I never get him mad. But yeah. So Um, I definitely had to get checked a lot of times. I think my older homies that were still kind of like helping out on All Mail, they definitely gave me some reality checks, and it was needed. It was definitely needed. But yeah, yeah, you know,
That's a good one too, and I think that's you kind of alluding to that right now. But just if you can just talk about the importance of having mentors, and what, it doesn't matter what space you're in. I think
mm-hmm.
mentors are extremely important, and maybe if you can just share, maybe some people like who are mentors to you, and maybe some of the things that have just really resonated with you and kind of helped you moving forward in your career.
Yeah, wow. I have a lot of mentors for sure. I mean, I can go on about this page, but four people that come to mind. Christy Greenway. She was director of Eastlake's dance team or dance like program at the time. She's a dance teacher at Eastlake. Kirk Akayan, Robbie Dell. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Kirk. Dang, Kirk and Robbie. They were on Flipside. They were on Formality. They were on Culture Shock SD. Robbie went on to be on The Most by Jonathan Cison, and Kirk went on to SGBM and he directed for a couple of years, I think. Those guys are like my kuyas. They're my older brothers. They basically taught me a lot growing up because I've known Robbie since I was a sophomore and I've known Kirk since I was a freshman. Kirk was actually my first dance class. So there are a lot of things that they taught me along the way, which I'm really happy for. And then the last person I want to mention is Keone Madrid for sure. Mm, yeah, just being able to have him as a mentor and to be able to pick his mind and work with him, work under him, like with Building Block,
Mm-hmm.
Babel, all that stuff. Like it's been really cool to see, and it's just being around someone of that caliber who is regarded as like one of the best in the world, like
Mhm.
being able to see their mindset and their work ethic and the way they think about things, it speaks wonders. And I encourage anyone to get a mentor, but honestly, like don't stress about getting the best, like the number one person in the world, because everyone has something to offer. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, I mean, I think it speaks wonders having someone to look up to or having someone to guide you, because at the end of the day, like unless you've been in the game for like super long, like sometimes you won't know how things are unless someone directly tells you, like, yeah, so
Absolutely. Well,
yeah,
one, thank you for sharing those mentors. They're, all great people
yeah,
and dancers,
yeah,
and just kind of going and kind of contrasting that, Juju, and the importance of mentors, but also self-awareness and self-discovery. And so, kind of going back to that time when you took a break specifically from leadership from
yeah,
220, and maybe talking about what that break did for you. I don't know if you remember, our dance paths actually crossed again in 2010. I don't know if you know where I'm
yeah,
going with this, but at the time, the 3 years prior to this, I had taken a break from choreography and hip hop, so to speak, and I was
right.
focusing on ballet, jazz, and tap and all that stuff at SCPA. And we found each other again on SGBM. I don't know if you remember this.
SGBM.
Yes,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
at
The
auditions, and
tryouts. Yeah,
yes,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
so and I remember just being so like energetic because I was like, whoa, I haven't done this in literally 3 years. And so
yeah.
you kind of getting that little gap and having that break mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, in the director's seat. What did that
Right.
do for you to having that break and then going back into it in 2018, I think, for your last
Yeah,
year?
yeah.
What was that like?
Uh, it it was a good change of pace for sure. At the time, commuting was definitely taking its toll. It worked for the first couple of years, and then eventually, like things as college was ramping up and I was getting closer to that degree, the workload just got harder. So I had to make the grown-up decision to step down, and let people run the team. And that was perfectly fine, because I felt like the people running the team they were perfectly capable of doing it. So I felt no need to like step in. Um, so I took a back seat for that season, or the a couple of seasons. Um, Played that role as kind of like the vet. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like someone to talk to the newbies, let them know what's up, what the team is like. Um, and then hop in when they would need like sections of choreography, because I was still choreographing at the time. Um, but yeah, it was a good change of pace, because it allowed me to kind of be a part of the team without having to worry about leading, and it allowed me to listen to other things going on, like because as a leader of the team, like you know what's going on within the team, but
Mm-hmm.
there's always going to be like a little bit of separation between like the leadership and the management and the dancers.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? There's always going to be like something that you can say to your homie across the room, but you can't really say to like the directors. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that was a good experience for me, because I felt like I was really able to listen to what the team needed, or what the team would need, or what the team had gripes about, and I would be able to either a communicate it to the directors, or b like just alleviate the situation by myself.
Absolutely. And I've always
Yeah,
felt that about your personality and always saw that even, from afar and knowing like Juju's definitely, and I have never been in that space, but I was like, I definitely know Juju is the glue. You know what I mean? Just, and doing those little things. I mean, especially in a space
yeah,
where at the end of the day, there's a little bit of competition and there's a little bit of whether that's with yourself or with your teammates, and it can be healthy, right?
yeah,
And I
yeah,
think it's so overlooked, like how important that is. Like you said, even just making the newbies or the rookies feel integrated within a culture. With 220 being such a well-known name in our community, I
right,
think it's huge. And
yeah,
kind of just getting back to the college days and now kind of I know a big thing that's super scary and super tough is navigating post grad. Now life is kind of like whoa, like life starts now. So if you can just
yeah.
take us a little bit, Juju, um, navigating post grad life.
Yeah, navigating postgrad life was crazy, in a sense where I had just finished. I had just finished my degree, um, and I was halfway into my last year of directing 220. So it was definitely a transition because I felt like I was going 100 miles per hour in both things. 100 miles per hour, like with all the college stuff, and then 100 miles per hour with dance because at this time I was traveling and teaching and getting gigs, and dance orgs would fly me out on top of directing. So when college got out of the way, I was left with this huge open space, and I was like, okay, what do I do now?
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. And it honestly took me a while because I did what every college or post grad person would do after college, and that was apply to jobs. And um, getting used to that way of life was definitely it was a hard transition for me because like job searches are really tough. Like you will send like hundreds of applications and not get a single email back, and it's tough on the self-esteem if you're not
Mm.
aware of like how powerful your thoughts are. You know what I mean? And that's definitely a lesson I had to learn because at the same time I was going through, like I was finishing my last season, and it was good, but I could definitely tell like I was off balance because of what was going on in the other parts of my life.
Mm.
So yeah. Luckily though, at the end of my last year on 220, I kind of made the decision to step away from the team, to focus on that part of my life that I really wanted to work on, which was my career and my which was my career and my health. And I it was super funny because the day after 220's banquet, when I announced to the team that I was leaving, Beyond the audition flyer for Beyond Babel came out.
Mm.
Yeah, I was scrolling through Twitter in my living room, and um, I saw the flyer there, and I was like, oh, well, I mean, I'm already applying to things. I haven't been getting anything back, so why not? So I applied. I got the invite to the audition. I went to the live audition. Um, I didn't think I was gonna make it, but I made it. And yeah, and it started a whole new chapter in my life, which was Beyond Babel, and
Mm.
that was probably a crazy experience for me because it gave me the opportunity to dance professionally in a more traditional sense of professionally, I guess.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
and I'm excited that you finally brought that up. I was waiting for it. And if you could just
yeah.
give the audience and whoever's tuning in just a little bit more light into more about what Beyond Babel is, and also the other opportunities that kind of stemmed from that initial experience in doing the show with Keone Mari.
Right. So Beyond Babel is a theatrical dance show that started in San Diego. It's a 2 hours long dance show telling the story of Romeo and Juliet. And the style of dances are what come from our dance community, which is SoCal style,
Mm.
California style, whatever you want to call it. Um, yeah. And then eventually in 2019, it did well in San Diego. So the producers decided to take it to New York, where it aired as an off Broadway show for 2 months before the pandemic. Some opportunities that came up from just being a part of the cast would be dancing at Coachella with Billie Eilish,
Mm-hmm.
and then later dancing as a part of her tour in her LA and San Diego shows. And then the another opportunity would be Cirque du Soleil. We had the opportunity to perform at one of our numbers at a Cirque du Soleil event, one night for one drop. It featured a ton of acts, Blue Man Group, Hans Zimmer,
Mm-hmm.
um, amazing performances. And another one that came up was it being a part of the show inspired me to start Platform, which was
Mm-hmm.
a local dance showcase here in San Diego that uh, aims to feature like our local talent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And just I love how you brought that up too. It's so perfect. And talking about, I think you're at this point, Juju, where you've done so much in your career, and kind of getting a little bit more into platform, and that's kind of like your baby.
Yeah.
and talking about like what were the inspirations and what was kind of like the reason for that to ultimately give back to the community.
Right, right. So I was living a dream for the past 2 years. Well, I mean, this is probably end of nope, March 2019. This is the end of Beyond Babel season 2, and this is where like um, you know San Diego's last show of Babel. So we were getting ready to pretty much be released out into the wild again for the first time and for what seemed like forever. Um, so I was thinking at the time I was thinking about like what were my next moves, because I had been dancing on the show for about 1.5 years now, and you know I wanted to make sure that that transition would from Babel to whatever I was doing next would be like smooth.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to um, go ahead and start a showcase. It's been an idea. It was at the time it was an idea in my head for a while, but after being a part of Beyond Babel and realizing how few opportunities dancers in San Diego get to actually perform and share their work, I kind of went ahead and pulled the trigger on starting a platform. I think the week after Beyond Babel like ended, I hit up like I hit up some choreographer friends and to see if they were down to do a showcase, and they were down, and I was like, okay, well, since I've already asked them, I guess I have to like do the showcase then. So
Mm-hmm.
so next day I booked a venue, and from there we started the marketing process and stuff. Yeah, it's
And we've
crazy.
had what was it, two or three, four maybe?
Yeah,
How
we're on
many?
our third. We're on our third. We were planning our fourth, but then quarantine happened. But
Mm-hmm.
we're thinking of some things.
Yeah, no, and I
Yeah.
think that's just getting to my next point and talking about, everything happening in the world, and this is probably the first thing that's actually directly affecting everyone in one way, shape, or form,
Yeah.
and specifically you and I as artists, and that being such a big part of our lives. If you can just talk about what that adjustment is like, what it's been like for you, and then
Mhm.
maybe just thinking about like how artists, other artists too, how we
Yeah.
can ultimately evolve and grow from this, because this is a very trying time, especially for artists. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I think dang. So yeah, how my quarantine journey has been pretty crazy. I think coming back from New York after doing like a couple months of shows, um I felt like I wasn't ready to come back. Like I was still in that mindset where I needed to train, I needed to like keep going. I wanted to stay in top physical form so that when the show starts again, at the time I didn't know if it would be like 20 at the time it was like end of 2020. Now it's definitely like later 2021. um, but I definitely went into quarantine with the mindset of okay, I'm just going to keep up with my training, and I'm going to try to dance every day, and I'm going to do thing or always try to like build my skill set, whatever that be maybe, like whether marketing or
Hmm.
dance or whatever, content creation. And it was good. It was good for like 2 months, 2.5 months, and then all the shit started going down with Black Lives Matter and like all the community news with the sexual harassment stuff.
Hmm.
Um, and that definitely took me out of it for I don't know, like 3 weeks, because like I when the community's hurting, like I feel it too. Like I'm definitely it definitely like put a toll on me. But I snapped out of it, got back into things, and then I started designing my life from there. Like I made a choice to get back into applying for jobs, like marketing jobs, because we don't really know when this quarantine is going to end, and um, I kind of want to make sure a job is a really good way to build a skill set in the first
Hmm.
place. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
um, of course, you have to have certain qualifications to get the job, but once you get in there, you learn so much. Like it's basically school.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah,
And
and go
talking a
for it.
little bit, sorry, just a little bit about you kind of changing, putting on a different hat,
Yeah.
and I don't know if how that affects you, maybe positively or negatively. I mean, just especially with all the opportunities in the most recent years, you've been literally traveling and performing and doing all these amazing things.
Yeah.
You know, what's the effect like of like having a true complete 180 of like, okay, well, that realm is on pause and we don't know
Yeah.
how long that's going to be for.
Yeah.
How does that affect you going forward?
To be honest, it's discombobulating. Like you feel like you're going 100 miles per hour, and then eventually, and then suddenly, the world stops, and you're kind of like, "What are we doing now?" You know what? Now that we're having this talk, like it kind of feels similar to after graduating, right?
Mm,
Like being like, okay, what do we do now? You know, after you work so hard to get this degree, and it kind of felt the same way, and it definitely took a lot of time, and it definitely took a lot of like really hard nights where I'd have to like think about, you know, what I want to do with life. And I'm still honestly going through that right now. It's just I have a healthier mindset. But yeah, it's honestly really tough because, you know, thinking that your life is set and you're going to be doing this for the next couple of months, and having to cancel the show and moving back home to, you know, your parents' house where you thought you'd never have to like be again. You know what
mm,
I mean? Um, but yeah, to be honest, it's these moments like are definitely needed. If and to elaborate on that, I think you know, sometimes life will throw like these moments in life's curveballs are going to be inevitable, and as a human, you have a choice to either accept what's happening, or no, yeah, you have to accept what's happening even if you can't control it, right? um but the thing that you can control is how you react to things.
mm,
You know what I mean? So like having, yeah, this quarantine is bad for the world, and it's a horrible situation that we're in, but it's also like um it's something that we can't really control. And you know, when you think about what you can control, it's basically yourself. Like, what are you going to do during this time? How are you going to approach it? Are you going to chase something that you've been putting on the back burner for a while, or are you going to, you know, take care of yourself? You know what I mean? Like, those are things that we need to ask ourselves, especially in this quarantine, because yeah, the situation sucks, but we definitely have control over how we react.
mm. I
Yeah.
think that's so big. You know, I'm definitely fall victim to that. And, you know, just
Yeah.
sometimes being
Me
like,
too.
what the hell? And kind you know, letting the emotions take over and you really stressing the importance of, you know, controlling what you can control and understanding that. I think that's huge. That's
Yeah.
huge, especially for us artists.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
not, and I think you're the same way, getting a lot of stimulation like from human connection, and we
Yeah.
don't have that. And maybe just, you know, we're used to being, whether we are a little more introverted at times, I think we all like to be social butterflies. And just
Right.
talking about like how that isolation has kind of affected you in your daily
Yeah.
whereabouts, like
It's
how has that affected you?
whew, it's crazy, man. You know, I'm usually really extroverted, especially in like social settings, dance settings and stuff. But when I'm home, when I'm in my personal space, like I'm, I am a homebody, like 10,000%. Like I love playing video games. I'm
Mm.
truly like, if I'm home alone and, you know, like I have like a couple hours to kill, I will like hop on, play some games, like, um, so, you know, I don't mind being the extroverted when it comes to being at home. The problem with quarantine was I was at home a lot with hella time,
Mm.
and you know, although like you can only dance in your garage, play video games, learn how to cook. You can only do things by yourself for so long before you need like social interaction. Um, and luckily, I caught it, or I started realizing this like maybe like 1.5 months in. So to combat it, I started hitting people up just to like talk, you know,
Mm.
and that definitely helped a lot. Like having conversations with homies, just about anything really.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's super huge, and that's kind of, this in a way that's what the podcast is too, and
Yeah,
allowing just that connection and be like, oh man, like I can still do this to some degree, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
I think too, just kind of going back to who you are, your nature, and you being an artist and a dancer,
yeah.
and those, to me, in my opinion, are some of the most critical people. And the reason being is, I mean, we live and die by, we're looking at ourselves in the mirror and being like, oh, like what else is wrong? That's essentially the question we ask all the time. And being in the situation now, and you talking about it, all these adjustments, going from
Right,
100 miles an hour to everything coming to a damn near stop,
right,
and then even that adjustment to moving back home, and
right.
just talking about that dynamic, and just that whole recipe for, whoa, this is like a complete, I never thought I'd be here. So if you can just talk a little bit about that too as well.
Right. Yeah. It was definitely a shock for sure. Um, I'm also the type of person to kind of bury my head in my work. So
Mm,
the moment I got home, like I set up a strict regimen. I was like, all right, so I'm gonna cook in the morning. I'm going to like write. I'm gonna like type things out. I'm gonna plan out my day. Um, and then for 3 hours at 2 p.m., I'm going to freestyle. See where that takes me. Maybe film a freestyle or whatever
mm-hmm,
for like content. And then towards the end of my day, like you finish it off with like some video games or whatever, just to
mm-hmm,
like chill, get my mind off that mindset. And it was working.
mm,
But yeah, eventually like things start happening and you start realizing that it's even though the world like stopped, technically things are still moving. So you
mm.
kind of have to like keep it moving as well. Um, yeah.
And
Wow.
that structure is huge, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
feel like now that you kind of have complete takeover with your time, and you're like, okay, well, I need to fill the rest of my day, as opposed to before it was like, I need more hours in the day. And
Right.
it's like that
Right.
that opposite way, like working differently and being like, okay, well, like let me not waste this valuable time that I have and try to learn something and try to make sure I stay structured somewhat, some
Right.
sort of normalcy. So I appreciate that. I think that's huge. And for those that are listening, I think that's something that we could take, and setting a structure for ourselves. And I don't even know, like, Juju, even too, like, do you, that's another thing that I get when people ask, like, oh, like what'd you do for a workout? Like, do you ever deviate off of like that original plan that you set? Or is it kind of flexible, and like do you feel bad when you don't stick to that plan? I mean, there's so many things.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Uh, okay. One of my favorite like Kobe like not mantras or like nuggets that he left is actually about his warm up, because when Kobe talks about his warm up, it's he talks about how you're not supposed to, or you shouldn't really stick to the same warm up every day. You should warm up according to how your body is responding.
Mm,
So like maybe like one game or one pre warm up before a game, like his right hamstring is more tight than his left, so he'll spend more time like working that out.
mm,
Um, I'd like to take that approach when it comes to like my days as well. Um, it's easy to forget. To be honest, like I kind of forgot about that for the first couple of weeks, and I was kind of just like
mm,
go go go. But eventually, like I reread his Mamba Mentality book,
mhm,
and it was one of the pages. So I was like, okay, well, that's definitely something I can take for like and apply to my day. Like it doesn't have to be this and this every day. Like sometimes, sometimes you're gonna want to play like Smash for like 2 or 3 hours. You know what I mean, in the morning.
yeah.
And that's totally fine. Or sometimes, maybe your meditation isn't going to be like 5 minutes, it's going to be like 10 because you need it. So depends. It always depends, but I love that approach because it doesn't marry you to one idea. It just
Mm.
gives a nice little like outline, and it leaves room for like flexibility, which is always good.
I love that. I love that. It doesn't,
Yeah,
you have a little bit of structure, but you can play within that structure.
yeah,
I love
yeah,
that.
exactly.
Kind of taking us now to, I mean, a little bit more in terms of one. I mean, we've been in this thing for six, 7
6 months.
months, right?
Yep.
Not just limited to artists, Juju, but what is your outlook on moving forward,
Mm,
um, coming out of this
yeah.
in general thing, and then to what is your outlook on the arts? Let's just say post 2020.
Right. Right.
So yeah,
Oh man, I can go on about this.
do it.
I think the world, even though everything has kind of like slowed down, the world is still changing. Industries are developing so fast because technology is developing, right? Um, like for example, podcasts weren't even a thing like 10 years ago. Now they're blowing up. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean? Content creation, YouTube, Twitch. Everyone's getting into Twitch now. Everyone's getting into YouTube now. Same with data. Like in the marketing field, like AI is becoming really big. Data's been big. Now it's getting even bigger.
Mm-hmm.
So the skills are needed to succeed in that field are changing. Same with sports. Same with like entertainment. Like the way we view things is actually changing. Like especially with playoffs, with like streaming services, all that stuff. The world is changing, and even when it comes to artists, it's up to us for adapt. Particularly, I'm going to speak out to dance educators because
Mm-hmm.
we're not only artists, but we're also teachers. So thinking about
Yep.
how the teaching industry is changing, is going to affect like how we approach our dance classes, right? Because Zoom is definitely a thing, but I do think that there's more to it. Or I do think there are more options other than Zoom. Like you can take like, pre-recorded classes, or um, maybe even, you know, instead of teaching a combo, doing a lecture. All these things,
Mm.
like, approaching education is going to be our challenge as dance teachers. For artists in particular, we're definitely going to have to um, like definitely get creative in terms of like how we produce art, how we share our art. um as coming from the event coordinator side, me and the platform team, like we're thinking about ways to bring like an online dance showcase, and what does that look like, you know what I mean? Like um so there are definitely a lot of things that questions we need to answer. And there are definitely a lot of problems that we need to get creative with, because um, these are not problems that we've seen before.
Mm.
Totally brand new, and we kind of have to like deconstruct everything, and um, like how I was saying about subtracting and then putting back in and prioritizing, right? Like we have to kind of prioritize what we want out of our classes, because even with this Black Lives Matter stuff, like um, the way we teach classes needs to be really intentional now, because um, when you teach dance, it's culturally, especially when you teach hip hop, um, it's culturally bound to something. So there are meanings there, like there's a history gets connected to moves. With choreography, it's more so like teaching the intention of the movement at that moment of time, like what that piece entails, what it requires out of the dancer. You know what I mean? So as dance educators, we have to be intentional with what we teach and what we teach for. Yeah, that was a lot, but I hope there's something in there.
No, there. I mean that last part especially, hitting that on the head. It's
Yeah,
I think we've always known it,
yeah,
and I think it took so much, and I'm speaking directly to our involvement with the dance community and just acknowledging where our movement originated from
right.
and stemming from hip hop. And I think that's something that, from me, that I've known you, you've always been huge on those morals and those values of just loving dance. And I know you know the history, and I know the history, and we've
Yeah,
talked about this before. And just
yeah,
I think it's I think a lot of people, and it's great to see our love for and our community grow so much. But it also, sometimes it's like, oh man, like I wish you would put more time and not to just like, oh, like I look cool, which is, it's great. Everyone looks cool now. It's like
yeah.
it's overwhelming, like, man. But is there density? Do you know where this comes from? And so I just want to say thank you for one saying that, because that's huge, and I think people need to hear that, not just from, one angry person in the community, but maybe two.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not really. Maybe it is anger, but I'm definitely coming from like a tough love perspective because like I I think our community is so unique,
Mm,
and like there's no community in the world than the San Diego dance community because I don't know, we just have a cool system and we've produced so many like awesome dancers. Um,
mhm,
it's just right now uh, our system's outdated. Our system of teaching is outdated. Like
mm,
um, people, like students in the community, are using choreography classes to learn dance moves
mhm,
instead of actually hopping into like, you know, a foundational hip hop class or a foundational popping class. You know what I mean? Instead, they're getting these hits from like choreographers who aren't trying to teach moves; they're trying to teach like pieces. If that makes sense.
mm.
Mm-hmm.
That's huge. That's huge.
Yeah.
And getting in those foundational classes is huge. I
Yeah.
think I'm going with that too, Juju, and you kind of shedding a light on your thoughts on where the art is going, and kind of evolving with that. I wanted to ask you too, just, I mean, me personally, having taken a couple classes online, and for me, it's not, it's obviously a different experience, but it's one that's really trying for me personally,
Yeah.
because it's something I don't know if I want to partake in as much as I did, what dance was pre-COVID.
Right.
Like, I don't know if I want to live through the computer and teaching that and taking classes there. And so maybe if you can just talk a little bit about like how these, adapting, like, is one going to affect you as, a student taking class, a teacher
Right.
teaching class, and then three, even to your standard of you putting on events, and this COVID completely affecting event planning for at least the next several years, directly.
Right, right, right. Oh, well, I personally, I'm not a fan of the online dance classes, to be
Hmm.
honest, but I have taught a couple. And I think as teachers, if we are teaching online dance classes, it's our responsibility to um, instill that mindset in our students that, hey, like, yeah, this situation isn't ideal, but you are responsible for your training. And when we do get back to normalcy, because we will, it might take a few years, but we will. Um, there are going to be people hitting the ground running, and are you going to be that person?
Mm,
So yeah, taking responsibility for the room, dictating it, as a teacher should, and as a student having a really strong mindset of discipline. um, to be honest though, like as a student, for me, like I love taking online dance classes is like hit or miss for me. But I've definitely embraced more of the freestyling aspect of my training, and I think that's I think it's so much more. It works for me because um, I've reached that level of dance where I can analyze how I move and
mm,
analyze like what I want to work on. So I don't need a dance teacher to tell me like, oh hey, work on this. Oh hey, work on this.
mm,
I dictate my training and I move how I want to move. And if I feel like I can utilize more movement of a certain texture or a certain feeling, then I'll play around with that texture. So
mm.
yeah, 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 yeah. And then for event planning, man, like, dude, it's a whole nother beast. Like, because live events are the bread and butter of any community. Like, because they bring people together, people share an experience, and it allows for like a moment of bonding. You know what I mean? Like, oh hey, you went to Vibe 2015, dope. I performed there. And you're like, oh yeah, I saw you. You're pretty good. Yeah, like that kind of stuff. Um, so like coming from the event planning side, trying to recreate or create something similar where people can come together online virtually, experience something together, and then um, become closer from it. That's something we're definitely looking into recreating.
Mm.
And yeah, it's a challenge, but I mean, it's I feel like it's a good skill to kind of like get used to doing because we don't know how long online events. I mean, for all we know, online events might be a thing for the rest of like our lives.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Is that something? you as an event planner essentially, and you putting these things on, is that something that you're embracing, or is it kind of more similar to like, I don't really dig the online taking classes, so like where do you fall in that spectrum?
I definitely want to embrace it. I think even though it isn't ideal, I also want to. It's a good segue into production, into content creation,
Mm.
right? Because um, yeah, having an online event, that's literally content right there. Like depending on how many acts you have, that's 12 YouTube videos, 12 posts on social media. You know what I mean? And being able to, curate that content using like a streaming broadcast system like OBS or Streamlabs, right? Um, and being able to learn that skill is also very important. Like knowing how to change scenes, because you never really know. Like what if you run a company and online events are a part of that industry, like
Mm.
having that experience in the back of your pocket, being like, oh yeah, I know how to run this program, it might serve you well.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you're embracing that. I feel like that's definitely going to be a lot on your plate,
Yeah.
but the platform that you essentially provided for our community is
Yeah.
huge, and I think a lot of people, myself included, are definitely waiting for that, and we want those things.
Yeah.
um and just kind of culminating everything, Juju. And we've only gone surface level with your dance journey and just your narrative, but
Right.
just taking everything in that you've experienced in leadership roles and in the spaces that you've been as a dancer and as a student, and just all the adversities you've been through. If you can just say anything, Juju, anything to your 13-year-old self,
Oh man.
what would you say to your 13-year-old self?
To my 13-year-old self. I mean, I guess I'd tell him what I'm learning now. Um, and that's well, there are three things that I tell myself every day. Um, be patient. You are exactly where you need to be.
Mhm.
And my third one, the one that the thing that I'm currently working on, and it's cool that this we had a conversation about like you know how my life has been, because I feel like this has been a constant theme throughout my life. But designing how you want to live is a really important um, thing to consider, and it's a really important thing to be mindful of, because at the end of the day, you can choose how to live how you want to live. Um, of course, as if it's socially, it doesn't even have to be socially acceptable. You just don't go off killing people, like, or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, but like life design is something that I've been studying for the past couple of months. And um, you know not everyone, or you don't have to do a 9 to 5. um like 9 to 5s are actually becoming less and less common, just because of how like the job market is, and how like how like certain industries are being like so disruptive, like content creation and podcasts and stuff. Like people can make several streams of income off of doing things that they love to do. um and if I were to tell my 13-year-old self, the last thing I would tell my 13-year self is live the way you want and design your life to fulfill what you need.
Mm.
Yeah.
I love that. That is amazing. Well, there are a lot of moments in your narrative, Juju, that I just want to say thank you for not only just being, giving us your time, but also just sharing that and really digging deep and just, sharing some really personal things. And I know that you're gonna help a lot of people, and whoever tunes in on this. So I just want to say thank you, Juju, for coming on here, and I'm looking forward to at some point checking in back with you somewhere down the line,
Yeah.
and kind of seeing where we're at. Post all this COVID stuff.
Yo, if you interview me a year from now, I'm looking forward to that interview, because I hope things pan out the way they're supposed to pan out.
I think so. We'll definitely work it out. And just a quick aside, I actually read a letter that I wrote to myself a little under a year ago. So like on the September 20th.
Whoa.
Yeah, I do it from time to time, and it was just like
Yeah.
it was a good like I was really feeling down and just it's funny how you say that. So we'll have to
Yeah.
do it in a year at the minimum, and we'll definitely check back in with you. But I just want to say thank you, Juju, for coming on to the Of Like Minds video podcast today, and looking forward to seeing you again, man.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, bro. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate you. Appreciate you. We'll see ya.
Yes. Yes.